Hello, everybody. I'm Chuck Street. I'll be your host today for this episode of I Remember the Inland Empire. Today, we're especially pleased to have with us Kathy Garver, who lived in the Inland Empire for a period of time during her very, very successful and illustrious life. But Kathy is an actress, a very accomplished actress who was acting on radio, on television, in some movies, and is probably best known for her role in Family Affair. So Kathy, welcome to the program. We're thrilled to have you with us today.
Thank you, Chuck. It's great to be here.
Great. You came to the Inland Empire as a kid, and really your father brought the family to the San Bernardino area because he was an architect by trade, right? And he had some special projects in San Bernardino. Can you talk about those a little bit?
Sure. He was an architect contractor, and I was born in Long Beach, Southern California, and the rest of my family, I have two brothers and a sister, and my mom and dad have passed, and they were all born in Oklahoma. So, and he built churches in Oklahoma, but the Dust Bowl hit, so it was time to move west. And the first place that he landed was in Long Beach and then Baldwin Hills. Then he built us a home in Beverly Hills, and he worked for a contractor there who a building developer who had started Rossmore, which was the first walled community. And he was one of the first people, my father, to come up with a concept of building a model home. So instead of just trying to build a lot of different homes, he says, well, what is this going to look like? He says, well, we'll just finish one and we'll then furnish it. What a concept. So I was very proud of my dad because he, came up with that concept. So when these tracts of homes were finished, he got an offer that he couldn't refuse, which was to go to San Bernardino to build tracts of homes there. And so the developer there was David Bruce. And so he bought us a house on Valencia Boulevard in San Bernardino, and I started the 9th grade at Golden Valley Junior High, which was on Waterman. Now I understand, Chuck, right? It's now called a middle school instead of junior high. And it was a little bit of an adjustment to go from Beverly Hills, and I was in Westwood at junior high and the 7th and 8th grade. And that's always kind of a difficult time, I think, for kids going from being 12 to being 14, those tweener years. That's why they separate them, because only the parents sometimes can love those tweeners. But I was very grateful to meet a wonderful group of friends with whom I am still friends with after years, a lot of years. And there's, to me, nothing like having an old good friend, because after junior high, so many of us went to Pacific High, and that was a fabulous school as I look at things now. And for me personally, it was good to get out of Hollywood, because I was doing, as you have iterated, I was doing radio and television, I was doing stage and movies. One of the first movies I did was The 10 Commandments. And sometimes you can get caught up in that type of Hollywoodese. And also going from being a child to a teenager at 18, which they like to hire 18-year-olds to play 14 or 15 or 16 or whatever year olds. So, because 18-year-olds can work longer. And so I was saved that kind of tough age from starting as a child star, and then starting Family Affair, where I starred in one of the best TV shows, sitcoms ever. But San Bernardino was my savior, I think, in many ways. And we still have a coterie and group of friends that we all now have conquered technology to a certain degree, and we keep up. And I mean, there must maybe be 20 of us, Paul Sage and Ellen Gaynor, who is such a good friend of mine. And I was like a bridesmaid in her wedding. She was a bridesmaid in mine. And I just had brunch with her last week. and they live in Redlands, and they are such kind people. She and her husband, Stan, philanthropists. There's a whole wing in the hospital named after them, the Weiser wing. And they're great. So Paul Sage, and unfortunately Ricky Burris passed away. I dated Bob Damas. The Damas family was famous in San Bernardino for their orange groves and the other things, and the Tharps, Twyla and Twanette and Stanley and Stanford. And I wrote a book. I've written 5 books, but this book, Surviving Sissy, has like 3 chapters on San Bernardino, because the people and the lifestyle were so important to me at that age. And it was remarkable. And what I comment on is that this small town, and I think maybe we had 100,000 people, produced such really accomplished people. I mean, Bob Damas was on like the attorney's cabinet for Clinton, and Dave Richards, who went to either went to Yale. I think he went to both Yale and Harvard. Incredibly accomplished lawyer who also has this great big collection of Rudyard Kipling, and then was an activist for the aged. Twanette Tharp, and the whole Tharp family was Twyla is a well-known choreographer and very heralded and famous choreographer. And Twanette, who was in our class, was an interior designer and did Jackie O's houses back east. So, and Ellen and Stan, oh my gosh, they have helped so many people, nonprofits. He was a pharmacist. They started with one and then had more, and then was on the board in Sacramento. So I'm thinking, wow, what was that about San Bernardino that was able to produce these very accomplished, successful people, and especially in our class, 1963, is when we graduated. And I think part of it was because not only was that high school really good, I mean, there was the arts. I think the best acting job I have ever done in my life was on the stage of Pacific High with The Miracle Worker. And I practiced so long, I had to beg Mr. Williams to let me be that part. He was going to give it to this other girl who was a sophomore. And I said, come on, I'm a senior. This is my last time to be on stage. So I finally convinced him, and I went around the house bumping into things, trying to feel like what it was blind, but like to be blind. But I knew I did a good job when I'm doing that. And all of a sudden, I at the very last thing, I don't know if this play about Helen Keller and Patty Duke, who became a good friend of mine, won like an award for it, Academy Award. And she realizes that there is a relationship between a thought and a touch and language. And she says, what? Water. And it's such a powerful moment in that whole thing that you have this character that can finally understand. So I hear Danny Wilbur in the front row crying. I said, I got them. But they had the arts, and to this day, I'll remember my music appreciation class where they said, okay, listen to the different instruments in like the band or the orchestra. I says, oh, you mean there are different ones in there? And you can actually, separate them? I just thought, oh, that's all one thing, and that's a nice song, or they're playing my song. But I remember those things. And also I remember Mrs. Lehman. The English teachers were wonderful. They were really, really great. And I'll never forget the A that I got on a review that I did for To Kill a Mockingbird. And as such, I've written five books, and I really didn't go back. I went to UCLA and took some English classes, but it was that foundation. And we were not just like little angels when we were in Pacific High. And but that was our kind of little clique. And I was a cheerleader there. And then I became a pom-pom girl when I was at college, but I learned, that because I had danced all my life. So I just and acted. So that was really fun. So blah, blah, blah about me. But San Bernardino, this itself, what it was doing. going down, I forget the East Street, I think it was, when we used to cruise and not moon. And going up to the Damas's house because, well, I was dating Bob and the guys were having a sleepover. And so the girls wanted to go up and see what was going on. So we were 16, we were driving then. So we drove up there and all of a sudden we see Mr. Damas coming out with a rifle. I said, oh my gosh. So we all got back in the car and zoomed away. I didn't know if he knew it was us or he was, but I don't think so. I think, who's coming onto our property? But I have fond memories.
You mentioned Paul Sage. Was he related to the Sages family that had the supermarkets?
Yes, that's Paul, and he's in Idaho now. And yes, we had good markets to go to. The Stater Brothers and Sages were, kind of always at loggerheads, maybe. That business is like 1 or 2 cents. Who's going to make a profit that particular week or not?
Well, it seems like Sages, the part of their moniker was Sages Complete Shopping. So that was one of the first experiences I ever had of a market that not only sold groceries, but had a lot of other departments, for clothing. And they even had a pet store at the Del Rosa location, a record shop. I used to run down there every week to pick up one of the Cayman tune sheets or KFXM tune sheets. It was called the Record Buyer's Guide. But my father was in the grocery industry, and he said that Sages just couldn't compete with Stater Brothers because Stater Brothers had lower prices. But still, Sages was such a prominent business in the Inland Empire. And I think we could probably do a whole program just on that. But back to you. One of the things I used to, I didn't attend Pacific High School, but I lived near there, and I used to walk through the campus and take a hike up Paris Hill. Did you ever do that? I thought it was such a great vantage point to get a look at the Inland Empire from up high.
No, I never did. I would have liked to have done that. I look at some of the albums now from that time, and I said, gee, I was doing a lot. So I personally was doing so many things. There were so many clubs that one could go to after school. So I belonged to the drama club, and then my friend Ellen was the president of High Tri or High Y, whatever they call the women's part, and I became the vice president. And there wasn't very much time to do things. Then I would go to cheerleading. I missed out on sex education, which was interesting because
let's talk about that.
Well, I want to tell you, and my friends, they were because I was so innocent. I went to Catholic school the first 6 years of my life, as did all my brothers and sisters. And then and then after, that's when I started junior high in LA. And so I didn't really ever know anything, and I would always just listen. So my little group of friends, Vicky Sachs and Linda Brooks, who became Devaki, and Marilyn Horwitz, who went to San Bernardino High, but she was a part of our group because she was dating Ricky Burris. Anyway, they told me all this awful things that weren't true. And then finally, they came to their senses and they said, we shouldn't tell her these things like this. So, but that's how I got my sex education was from my high school friends. No wonder they're still my good friends. They must have been on to something there. And we drank. We shouldn't have drunk, but there it was. Boones Farm Apple.
Boones Farm, apple wine. It was not very expensive, and it was sweet, right?
Oh yes, and then we had to mix it with 7-Up, which didn't make it any sweeter. Not so. It was.
Yeah.
There were lots of throwing up. Boones Farm, I tell you, my poor, innocent little body was not used to alcohol.
Yeah.
Which reminds me.
No, go ahead. Sounds like we reminded you of something.
Well, it reminded me of Prom Night, and this was when my father's now is in Needles, and he and my mom had this home that they were just renting for a while he was building the homes in Needle. And I was staying in at our home in San Bernardino. And I was supposed to be watched by my older brother, Lance, who was going to Valley College. And it was prom night. And so I had an older date. He was in college. And I hadn't really ever had anything to drink, but my parents were out of town. So I said, oh, everybody come over to my house and we'll have an after prom party. So we did. And that was the first time I ever had a screwdriver. It was orange juice and vodka. So my date gave me this. I said, oh, that's good. That's good. That's really good. So I stood up and sat right back down and didn't get up. And so my brother decided that was the night that he was doing something. He didn't come home till 4 a.m. or whatever. He sees all these people still there in the house. Well, so that was when I moved to Needles with my parents because they didn't think it was a good idea to have me and my brother at the house. Wow. Tales from the Inland Empire.
That's great. So you talked about your father and his very distinguished career as an architect. Now, your mom obviously was a very important factor in your life. And, you hear stories about stage moms, because usually the father in those times was the breadwinner, so to speak. And so the mother had a little more flexibility with her time. So she had to have been taking you to these auditions, right? In Hollywood, in Los Angeles. Tell us about your mom.
Oh, my mom was great. She was an RN, and that's how they met. And they were in Oklahoma City, and my dad was, I think, I'm not quite sure. I think he may have been having a gallbladder operation, and she was his nurse. Well, it was a relationship built at the hospital. So they fell in love, and she continued being a nurse until they had the first child. And then, as you say, she had 3 kids. And so she was really looking after them. When they got to Los Angeles, she was a very industrious and smart woman. And her mother, Gertrude, lived to be 101. Wow. And she immigrated from Austria when she was just like 18. And she then did a boarding house during the Depression. And then she moved to Los Angeles and built an apartment house. And then she built other homes. So she was like into real estate. And my mother picked up on that and had my father design an apartment building in LA, at 16 unit that she kind of overseed and was the manager of. And then I was getting into the business. I was at 3, I was at the Meglin Studios, Ethel Meglin. That's where Shirley Temple was discovered. Now, I wasn't Shirley Temple, but I could sing and dance and even act. So, so she became my manager. But let me tell you something, my parents saved every single penny of my money. They never spent anything. And even though, a lot of the parents, they take a salary as a manager, and and many times they should get something, because she would take me on interviews, and they paid for the singing lessons and the dancing lessons and the piano lessons and all of that. So I think that they should be entitled to something. My parents never took anything for doing that. My mother just enjoyed it so much. And even when we went to San Bernardino, she would drive from San Bernardino to LA to take me on auditions. But it was, it was a little bit of a drive. And I did go on but if they were a good job, like I went on an audition for Gidget, because I'm just like 5'1". And so I would have liked to have played Gidget. But there was just so much going on with my high school and studying, and I did do a very good job in school. And that's why I was able to go to UCLA along with Marilyn Horowitz and Ellen Gaynor, and Ellen became my roommate in the co-ed dorm, which was a new kind of concept at UCLA. So, but my mom was great.
So your mom had to take you out of school sometimes to drive to Los Angeles during the day, but it didn't seem like it hurt your grade point average at all. Were you taken out of school very often, or she did it judiciously?
Well, when I was a child, I was taken out a lot. And when you're under 18, they have to provide a welfare worker, they were called, which is actually a teacher. And you have to spend 3 hours out of an 8-hour day in that school and being taught. And you can only count 20 minutes. So you have to at least be there 20 minutes. So those 20 minutes then add up to 3 hours. And I was working a lot as a child. In San Bernardino, they would try to make the interviews after school. And that was for all kids. So they wouldn't have to particularly take them out for an interview and not take them out of school. So just when they actually got the job, I didn't do that much work while I was in San Bernardino, which I think is a blessing, because as I said, I could always play younger, and they wanted 18-year-olds that looked younger. So as soon as I turned 18 and then I was at UCLA, I started really working a lot again. Plus I was in LA.
Well, you mentioned the fact that you actually had to audition for the part of in The Miracle Worker at Pacific High School, but it had to have helped that you already were a working actress.
Well, this is what I told Mr. Williams. I said, look, I've done all this work before me. I did the 10 Commandments. I was in The Night of the Hunter. I was Patty Duke's friend, the Patty Duke show. They says, I should have this part. But I think really convinced him was that I was the senior. This was my last year. So that's what helped as well.
You indicated that your parents were smart enough to save all of the money that you had earned as a child actress. But there are a lot of child actors and actresses who didn't have parents like you did, who really ended up with nothing. And so I know you're a part of an organization called the Minor Consideration. Could you talk about that group?
Yes, I mean, child stars have kind of a tough road to hoe. And I am good friends with Paul Peterson, who started the organization, a minor, MINOR consideration for these kids. And he passed what is called the Coogan Law. Now, Jackie Coogan was a great big child star in the 20s, 30s. He made more than any adult stars. He was being paid the most. And when he got to be older, he had absolutely nothing because his parents spent every single dime. And so they finally, and Paul, got a law passed. And so a child now has to have a contract, and a portion of whatever they are paid has to be put into a separate account for them and through a bank, and it's saved there and nobody can touch it until the child is 18. Unfortunately, like my son, I put him in a couple things, a proud mom, and he did Nash bridges and things like that. And so I saved his money diligently and the Coogan account. And I said, Reed, now, you're 18 and here's a little 18th birthday present. Gone in a week. So sometimes, but just having the account and saving it, you also need to put in there a little financial training so the kids know what they're dealing with.
So the organization, it sounds like the purpose of the organization, a minor consideration, is to spotlight this issue and to at least give kids who are acting something to look forward to do maybe after the peak of their child acting.
Right.
And
it isn't just the financial thing like the Coogan Law, but there's actual training. Not every child, and I say that in my book, Ex-Child Stars, and I wrote this nice book about child stars. Paul Peterson wrote the foreword, actually, to my book. We're good friends. I just saw him last week in Palm Springs. So there are classes. You don't necessarily have to be an actor to be deemed successful. There are a lot of lawyers who were ex-child stars and teachers who are ex-child stars. There are many positions you can take behind the camera as a cinematographer. Look at Ron Howard as a fabulous producer, director, as a lighting person, as a gaffer. There's all kinds of different roles. Makeup artists, Lisa Loring, that was on the Munsters, became a wonderful makeup artist. So he tries to say, oh, okay, there's lots of things, and you have all this experience because you spent your life, naturally just, absorbing it and soaking it all up. So that's that part. Unfortunately, this is the saddest part. So many of these kids get into drugs. And again, I was just so blessed that I never really got into drugs. I only do Boones Farm, but now it's Chardonnay. But they drugs, and Paul helps them with that. And because you get depressed if you don't have something, you become that tweener, and you don't have a job, you don't have your public relations or your hairstylist or people saying, oh, you're so cute and you're fabulous. So a lot of the drug culture seeped into the child star war, and still into the adults. I mean, a lot of, and Johnny Whitaker that played Jody on Family Affair, he was into cocaine and this and alcohol, and he was Mormon, and his family said, look, and he was then destitute. He had spent all his money, they had a divorce, and then he got on drugs. And he says, and they said to him, look, if you don't get off drugs, we're going to divorce you as a family. Well, that kind of hit him at home. And so he got cleaned up and he became a drug counselor. And so he's now on a good path. And unfortunately, the little girl on our show, who is the brightest light and adorable and so sweet, died of a drug overdose when she was just 18. So many of these little lights go out because they don't have, I think, the guidance. And I think Paul, and a minor consideration, helps that. Many times poor Paul has been, well, he took this on at 3 a.m. in the morning, or somebody's in jail and needs his help, for drugs or something like that. And he goes and tries to help.
Well, anything else you would like to say about San Bernardino and the Inland Empire?
I thank God San Bernardino was there for me at that particular time in my life, and blessed me with such fabulous friends that are still my very good friend, Steve Dixon, and all the other wonderful people that I stay in touch with. And for my parents that brought me to San Bernardino, and set such a good example for me in many ways. So, and for the teachers at Pacific, I think that they were terrific. And to tell you the truth, better than UCLA. I mean, you go, all of a sudden you're in 300, you're in an auditorium learning philosophy instead of like Mrs. Lehman's class with 20 people. So, but it was really a wonderful experience. And I passed through it a lot to go to Palm Springs, but I really liked San Bernardino.
Well, Kathy, you have been a delight.
Thank you. Would you like to know how people can get in touch with me?
I sure would.
Well, let me tell you. You can go to www.kathygarver.com. That's KATHYGARVER.com. You can read about San Bernardino in my book, Surviving Sissy, My Family Affair of Life in Hollywood. That's on my website as well as Amazon. Might as well, since I'm being so self-promoting, tell you about my other books, which is Ex-Child Stars, Where Are They Now? And if you like to cook, I have a cooking show that we are doing. I was just the executive producer on this one show called Untitled Chapter that was on Retro TV. But we have another pilot that we've done called TV Dinners TV, where I'm the host. And we have child stars and classic stars, and we come and make healthy meals instead of the TV frozen ones. How you can make those meals. That's my book that's supposed to be out this year, TV Dinners. But the first cookbook I wrote was the Family Affair Cookbook. And this one is a nice one called the holiday recipes for a family affair. I am celebrity grand marshal of the strawberry parade in Garden Grove for Memorial Day weekend. And I have a recipe in here called strawberry trifle. So I'm giving people a copy of the strawberry trifle recipe when I go to the Garden Grove Strawberry Festival. And that's going to be really fun. And so I'll wave to all my San Bernardino and Inland Empire friends if you come see me. Now, this last book that I just came out with is the Family Affairs Scrapbook. And one of the reasons I did it is because I have to say it. It's the 55th anniversary of Family Affair. I do not know how that happened or why I graduated Pacific in '63 since I'm 39, but there it is. But this is the Family Affair Scrapbook. And this is really, it's so colorful. I love doing it with my, see, it's like a pop culture. See, it's backwards. It's like a pop culture kind of fun, lots of pictures, lots of memorabilia, the Family Affair Scrapbook. This is a collectible version and they have a printout version. And my Facebook is Kathy Garver /fan page and also my Kathy Garver group. So I think that's all the self-promoting I can do at this moment. Come see me at the parade. I have my movie coming out, Old Man Jackson, this year. And take a look at my books.
You are amazing. Thank you again for being with us.
Thank you, Chuck. I really enjoyed talking with you.
Good evening. It's so nice of you to join us.